This happened at my previous house before moving out. My wife and I both work in offices, so our work hours are practically the same. We have 3 children, all under the age of 15. Each time we work, our babysitter would be there an hour before her shift starts. Our house is a split-level updated house. And yes, we made sure that there wasn't any crime committed or deaths during the years of the property. It was a peaceful, quiet neighborhood with friendly neighbors to add on top of that. Never once did we experience anything strange or out of the ordinary until our last week before purchasing another house and selling the one we were in. If my memory serves me right, this happened in 2016 at the end of October. A typical day of the wife and I coming home to our kids so we could relieve the babysitter of her duty. My wife cooked, the kids did their homework, and I was sitting in my office room working on some bills. Right before 8 p.m., before it got dark outside, I slowly checked on the kids' homework and gathered everyone to the kitchen for dinner. Before getting to the kitchen, all the kids were in the bathrooms washing their hands as they normally do. After watching the kids pack their homework away and wash their hands, we all walked to the kitchen for dinner. My wife, who I thought was setting up the dinner table, was out in our patio deck talking to her mother. I went ahead and set up the dinner table with plates and finished cooking up what she had started. It was about 9 p.m. when I got everything done in preparation to eat. The kids sat at the table and I knocked on the glass sliding door, giving hand gestures to tell the wife to eat. I couldn't see her, so I turned on the patio light outside. She turned around and nodded her head yes. So all of us were there eating without my wife. While I was eating, I periodically checked on my wife outside. From her body posture and hands covering her face, it looked as though she was crying. Right before I could get up to check on her, she stormed inside crying. I've never seen her like this before, so this is all new to me. I didn't know how to react, neither did our kids. She ran downstairs to our second living space and sobbed on the sofa. I chased after her, asking what was wrong. Each time I asked, she cried more and more. So after about 30 minutes of her crying, she finally told me what happened. Her aunt passed away. She was in her late 60s, and cancer took her life. Fast forward to signing documents to our new home. On our last day at our old place before renting it out to tenants, we took the kids out to have one last night at the old place before leaving for good. The house was completely empty, aside from the air mattresses that I bought for our last night there. After visiting the mall, we came home at around 10 p.m. Exhausted and tired, we all went straight to sleep on the air mattresses. We all slept in one room, the master bedroom. All the bathrooms have motion sensor lights because my kids would wake up at night and use the bathroom. It made it much easier. I could remember this happening as if it was a few minutes ago. My wife and I couldn't sleep, but the kids were fast asleep. We stood up around 1 a.m. Tired and exhausted, our eyes kind of dozed off. My wife said softly that she was going to try and sleep, so I nodded and acknowledged her. A few minutes passed and she mumbled, "How are you, Auntie?" Of course. Instantly I thought that she was talking in her sleep, so I thought nothing of it. A few more minutes went by, and I felt hard breathing on my face. I opened my eyes and my wife was sitting in a cross-legged position with her head leaning over inches away from my face. I was freaked out and was a little jumpy but still remained calm. I asked her, "What are you doing? And why aren't you asleep?" She stared dead into my eyes, laid back against the pillow, gave me an evil smile, then turned her back against me to sleep. At around 2 in the morning, I was still awake and still very scared. I was extremely tired, and I kept my eyes closed in hopes that I will somehow get sleep. Trying really hard to sleep, I noticed that the bathroom light was on. I got up and checked the bathroom, thinking maybe it was faulty or something. I turned off the motion sensor, closed the bathroom door, and proceeded to the air mattress. We were next to our big bedroom window, and with the moonlight shining, you could somewhat see everything inside the bedroom. I saw my wife using a towel drying her hair. Right at that moment, just about every hair on my body stood up. My heart was racing, and my mind couldn't comprehend what I was seeing, if it was real or fake. I quietly asked my wife why she wasn't sleeping, and she responded with, "I'm going to be buried. I need to clean myself." Puzzled and scared, I called her mother since she was a shaman. At almost 3 a.m., surprisingly, her mother was still up. I told her to please come over. Something strange was happening to her daughter, and I didn't know what to do. I had explained everything to her, and she said to put her on speaker. So I had her mother on speaker with the volume on max. Her mother chanted some incantations for a good few minutes. While that was going on, my wife stared at me with a smirk on her face. Drawn to her looking at me, I started to notice that her facial features didn't look like my wife at all. And that's when it hit me. From that second, my body just froze. That person was her aunt. Her eyes then focused away from me, pointing at the corner, yelling, "I'm coming for you." She got up, and in an instant she was right in front of me. She opened her mouth, and I could hear multiple women crying, as if I was at a Hmong funeral. Keep in mind, this was at night, happening in my bedroom. I've never been so terrified in my life. From there, she continued walking slowly to the corner while staring at me. She reached the corner and started crying, saying, "I will take you with me."
I will take you with me.
From there on, I don't remember anything else. I woke up drenched in sweat with slight recollection of what happened. My wife was sleeping in the corner, and that's where I found her. My kids were still sound asleep, and over to my side, my mother-in-law was there, along with her shaman tools. I had asked my mother-in-law what she was doing here and why my wife was at the corner. She explained that the person who I thought was my wife was in fact her aunt who passed away. The aunt's spirit took over my wife's body and contacted my wife since they were very close. The aunt wasn't happy about her death, and she said that an evil spirit was coming after her before she had passed. So when she took possession of my wife's body, she was here to chase after the evil spirit and punish the spirit. Hearing this sent shocks through my spine. A few days later, I asked my wife if she remembered anything from that night. Her response was, "What are you talking about? I was sleeping downstairs." And I said that she was sleeping next to me and that her aunt took possession of her body. She smiled at me, thinking I was being silly, and said, "No, babe. I had woken up in the middle of the night to shower, then slept downstairs because it was cooler." During that night, I guess she had taken some pictures of the stuff she had wrote on the floor, saying that she would miss this place and for the tenant to take care of the property. She showed me the pictures and also some video clips she recorded that night downstairs. So, during that night of the incident, apparently, it was the aunt who we saw clearly sleeping at the corner of our bedroom. Needless to say, we ended up selling the property after a few months to the tenants. We were able to make a deal with them. The property is in North St. Paul, Minnesota. I lived in Fresno, California for most of my life. In fact, I'm still living here as of now. Anyways, my family and I lived in this old house on the west side of town, just down the street from Edison High School for a general location. The house we lived in was incredibly creepy. After moving in, most of our neighbors would come and ask us if we ever experienced anything unusual. They mentioned that most people who moved into that house left within a month, claiming it was haunted. Being Hmong, of course, we never let it bother us. One late night, as I was sleeping, I suddenly woke up coughing to the smell of dried chili peppers being roasted on the stove. The smell was strong and pungent, lingering throughout the whole house. I asked my older brother, who was still watching TV, why it smelled like that. He said not to worry about it. Mom was cooking. I didn't think much about it and said okay. Unable to fall back asleep, I decided to stay up with one of my younger brothers, who had also woken up for the same reason. We played video games in our room while our older brother watched TV in the living room. Soon after, our older brother came into the room and handed me a Hmong knife, saying that if I heard him screaming, I should run out there with it. Reluctantly, I asked him why, and he finally told me the story. We had a pretty big pit bull for a pet, and he wasn't tied in the backyard. He said that tonight, the dog was acting a little weird. It seemed like it was chasing something all around the backyard, so our mother decided to burn the peppers just to see what would happen. He also mentioned that he was going to try and pretend to sleep so he could catch whatever was messing around. I agreed, and he went back to the living room, and I stayed up to watch my younger brother play a game. My older brother actually fell asleep because I could hear him snoring. It was about 3 a.m. by now when things started to get scary. We were in the room and all the lights were turned off. The only light source left on was the TV. Our bedroom door was wide open, and looking through it, it was nothing but pitch black. Only a small amount of ambient light came off of the TV, peering into the dark hallway. Suddenly, everything got real quiet and still, just like in those scary movies. I heard little footsteps running up and down the hallway. I could hear them run halfway up the hallway and back down all the way to the backyard door. I started to get creeped out by now. I didn't say anything to my younger brother because I didn't want to scare him too, and ran up and down the hall. After a while, it stopped. At this time, I was all ears trying to listen to whatever it was. Suddenly, I started to hear someone or something play with water, like someone was grabbing a puddle of water with their hand and slowly dripping it back down to the puddle. Drip, drip, drip. The only water source that came up in my mind that someone can play with was just the toilet water. I mean, what else was there that had water in it, right? After a while, it stopped. Then, the running continued up and down the hall. Out of nowhere, I heard it run all the way up to our bedroom door and stop. I stared directly at the door, wide open, and just darkness on the other side. I leaned back, getting prepared to throw the knife at whatever it was. With barely any light shining out to the hallway from the television, bam! I saw a dark shadow and black smoke peer right into the bedroom from the door, like someone is standing against the door with their back against it and quickly peering in. I could tell that it was definitely something, a human figure, but more like a black cloud of smoke. At that very moment, everything slowed down, like it knew that I saw it. It popped right back behind the door, and all you could hear was footsteps running back down the hall and out the backyard door. I was still in shock at what I just witnessed. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and didn't know what to think. Then after that, I heard the scariest thing I have ever heard in my entire life. For some reason, I knew it was that thing. I could clearly hear it in the backyard gurgling. At first it was loud, but slowly faded away as it got farther into the distance. I can't help but notice that whatever it was, it knew that night was ending and the day was about to start. At this time, the sun was beginning to rise, and I could see the dark blue hue of dawn starting to transition from night to day. When I was 8 years old, there used to be a Scary Tales show that aired every Saturday at 11 p.m. Unfortunately, I don't remember what the show was called. On that particular night, my 2 eldest brothers, younger brother, and I stayed up to watch the show. Meanwhile, my little sister, who shared a room with me, was sleeping in our room. During the middle of the show, I fell asleep on the living room floor. I was later woken up, freezing, and saw my sister laying beside me. Everyone had gone to bed, and when I checked the time, it was 3 or 4 a.m. A sense of fear began to creep in due to the dark living room and the jingling sound experience from years ago. I remember thinking to myself, those dudes just left me here. They didn't even bother to wake me. I contemplated running to my room and shutting the door. Suddenly, I heard dragging footsteps. The footsteps were walking back and forth from the living room to the hallway. I laid still, listened carefully with my eyes shut, hoping it wouldn't walk towards or besides me. Then, summoning the courage to stand up and ready to run to my room, the dragging footsteps stopped as I looked into the dark hallway. However, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I wasn't willing to ditch my sister. She was only 3 years old at the time. When I laid back down beside her and tried to get warm, I heard the dragging footsteps again. As soon as the footsteps went into the hallway, I got up and turned on the TV because I didn't want to hear the footsteps anymore. Laying back down with my eyes closed, I hoped for the sun to rise soon. I didn't know how many hours had passed, but I know I didn't sleep at all. It was still dark outside when I heard my brothers open their bedroom door. I looked at the time. It was 6 a.m. As soon as my brothers came out and watched TV in the living room, I finally knocked out. In my freshman year of high school, on a Saturday morning, I had the twin bed to myself. My 3 sisters slept on the bottom, and my 2 brothers slept on top of the bunk bed. I was sleeping at the foot of my bed with my head pointing toward the door. I woke up and noticed that my siblings didn't close the door after they came to bed. I looked at the time, and it was 6 a.m. No one was up yet, so I tried to go back to sleep. Then suddenly, I heard the dragging footsteps once again. It was dragging slowly past my door, and it went to the doors of my brother's room. It was going back and forth across the hallway. I was kind of scared, but after experiencing so much in that apartment for over the 9 years that I lived there, it doesn't bother me as much anymore, and I eventually fell asleep. I work in an old building in St. Paul. It was rebuilt about 8 years ago, so it looks new. You wouldn't suspect it to be haunted at all, but it is a very old building. I work on the second floor of that building, and most days of the week I am one of the last ones to leave, which is usually around 8 p.m. On this particular night, another staff and I were getting ready to leave. We were the last ones out, so we had to go through and turn off all the lights and lock all the doors inside, as well as the exterior doors. We made our rounds and locked all the doors. Then we made our way to the stairs and locked the door at the top of the stairs. We then walked down the stairs and started locking that door at the bottom of the steps. The stairs come down about 15 steps, and then there's a landing. You have to turn right around a wall to continue down the next 15 steps to get to the exit door. When standing at the bottom of the steps, you can't see the top half of the stairs because a wall covers it. Standing at the bottom of the stairs, we locked the door. As soon as the key jangling noises stopped, we heard what sounded like the door at the top of the stairs softly open. We stopped and listened, but nothing immediately happened. As soon as we were going to blow it off, we heard the door at the top of the stairs again. Once again, it sounded like it was softly opening, or perhaps closing. And then we heard footsteps. The footsteps were as though someone was coming down the stairs. We waited at the bottom of the stairs to see who would turn the corner, but no one ever did. Only after a couple of minutes, we built up the courage to go up and look. When we both walked up and looked, there was no one there. We then scrambled downstairs to the first floor. There was always a security guard outside, so we ran up to him and told the story. He agreed to go up and check. The security guard did a full walkthrough and said that all the doors were locked and that there was no one in there. We were spooked and decided to leave for the night. The next day, we asked to see the security footage. We saw us going through all the movements. We can clearly see the fear in our eyes as we made our way back up the stairs. But nothing. There really was nothing there. It was 1990, in the early December winter of Minnesota, marked by the worst year of snowfall. Our small family found ourselves alone in a house with a downstairs basement. My father would leave for night school, leaving my mother to babysit my older brother, who was 4 years old at the time, and myself, who was 2 years old. Despite my limited understanding of my surroundings, my older brother would always alert my mother in Hmong by saying "amao" whenever he sensed movements around the house. My mom, in her early 20s, would respond by turning on all the lights in the house. Every time someone left through the front door, a cold chill would run down our spines as the basement doorknob would rattle, as if someone was trying to open it from the other side. Though frightened, my mother had no choice but to stay with us until our father returned. During this time, my older brother would often point to the living room, claiming to see an ugly-looking man standing near the basement door. Each time, my mother would freeze or lose focus for a few seconds. Months passed and the same unnerving events recurred. The basement door rattling, lights flickering when going down to the basement. Our parents had clearly encountered some unsettling incidents inside the house, which they never shared with us. Concerned, they reached out to the landlord, inquiring about potential issues in the apartment basement, citing its persistent coldness and numerous paranormal activities. Surprisingly, the landlord acknowledged experiencing paranormal activities within the complex, expressing surprise that our family had stayed so long as most tenants move out within a month. Disturbed by the revelation, my father sought the assistance of a shaman to bless the apartment. After locating a shaman, the truth unfolded. About 6 months before our move-in, a man had committed suicide in the basement, and his spirit remained due to unfinished business. Upset with the landlord's lack of disclosure, my father decided to move out the very next day, essentially abandoning everything behind. Although relieved for our safety, our parents chose to keep the details of their encounters with the paranormal undisclosed. The lesson learned was clear. Always bless your new house before moving in. As you all know, Facebook live selling of Hmong fabrics and items has become popular. I have been wanting to buy a pair of Hmong clothes for myself since I don't own one. About 2 months ago, I decided to go buy a pair on Facebook. When the clothes arrived, I tried them on and really liked them. I stored them in my closet along with all my other clothes. After a short time, I started hearing knocks in the middle of the night coming from my closet. Dong. I didn't think much of it and didn't let it bother me since it was just 1 or 2 knocks, non-consecutively. Then, one night, the knock was louder and more consecutive, so it scared the crap out of me. I decided to turn on my lights and sleep with them on. I did open my closet and check, but did not see anything unusual. The next morning, I kept thinking, what could be wrong? Nothing like this has happened to me before, and the only thing I could think that was different was the new Hmong clothes that I bought. So, I decided that I would take out my Hmong clothes just in case and left them to the side of my room. Since then, the knocks have stopped. But suddenly, I started to have these weird, repetitive dreams that I've never seen before. The dreams would slowly unfold every time like a storybook. It was always about me running in a meadow and coming into a cave with a lake inside it. Then last night, the dream was at its clearest. The dream starts out with me and a guy, fully grown, a young adult, but I couldn't make out his face. I saw that he was wearing the Hmong clothes that I bought. Then, we saw people coming after us like they were going to beat us, so we made a run for it. We're running and jumping fences of multiple backyards. While we're running through a meadow, there was a cave, so we went inside of this cave. The cave is big and well lit with a nice light blue lake in front of us. The cave just looked like it was from a Chinese drama. Then we saw 2 really pretty girls in the water wearing silk clothing. I just couldn't seem to make out their faces, but I went into the water and swam with one of them. The other spirit came out and went with the other guy. After swimming for a while, the spirit and I both hugged each other for quite some time. This was a really strange dream, and after I woke up, my dog, who was sleeping with me that night, right next to me, was having a nightmare, so I got up and shook her to wake her up. She woke up and looked lost, and then came up close to me and laid down. But she was trembling. Not only so, but my other dog would also have nightmares as well, especially these past few nights. It started to occur to me that whenever I had these dreams, both of my dogs would have nightmares. Perhaps I'm thinking a little too much, but be careful who you buy your clothes from on Facebook.